Today, I want to teach you 3 simple ways to find out whether you're making enough progesterone relative to estrogen. I believe this to be an important skill that every woman should have, especially in the modern world where the risk of becoming estrogen dominant is quite high. And even though estrogen dominance can be due to different reasons like low thyroid, perhaps poor metabolism of estrogen, or not excreting estrogen efficiently from the body, low progesterone is also another cause of this that is not talked about enough. Progesterone is an incredible hormone that counteracts estrogen. If you're not making enough progesterone, you are missing out. Now, you'll see here on the screen, I have a graph from Inito. It's actually my own graph from 2024 when I started looking into this because I was suspecting estrogen dominance. I had done the Dutch test at that time. It didn't pick up on it. And then I started using Inito. And this is when I found out that I actually wasn't making enough progesterone in the luteal phase, which explained my symptoms. In my case, I had a lot of cramps in the lower belly, and this would occur on a daily basis during the luteal phase, at night as well, multiple times a day. The intensity would vary. I also had IBS-like symptoms where I felt the urge to go to the bathroom, but then I wouldn't pass anything. And I also had a lot of anxiety and moodiness, as well as getting very irritable easily to the smallest things, which was not like me. So these were some of the signs. For other women, this can look completely different. And through Inito, I was able to find that in the luteal phase, there was not even one single time where I made enough progesterone to counteract estrogen. Now, before we get into that specifically, I want you to look at the graph a little bit, familiarize yourself with the terms, because this will also be important later on when we talk about the other 2 methods, which would be the blood work and the Dutch test. So in this specific case, you'll see that the cycle length, the total cycle length, which a lot of women confuse with just your period, is 32 days. So this is the last day of the cycle. Let's mark this. And the following day, I got my period. So that would have been day 1 of the cycle. I started testing with Inito on day 10. So I had already had my period. And then fast forward to day 10 is when I started using the strips. I waited a little bit because I know that I tend to ovulate later in the cycle and I didn't want to waste the strips. But it is important that you start testing before ovulation because you do want to get a good baseline. And some women do actually make a lot more estrogen early in the follicular phase, which can also be a sign of estrogen dominance. And this is an easy way to find out if you're making more than you should be making in the follicular phase. From day 1, let's write the 1 right here, to day 18. This is the follicular phase. This is where the follicle is growing, is being stimulated. And it is during day 19 that I get this peak in estrogen, which triggers the LH to start rising, and that triggers the release of the egg. After the egg has been released, now we have the corpus luteum, which is going to start making progesterone. And progesterone will be made in higher amounts during the luteal phase. We do make it throughout the entire cycle. The adrenals can make it. But in the luteal phase is where we make a lot more than the rest of the cycle. For good reasons, we are counteracting that effect of estrogen. And ideally, what we expect to see in a normal cycle is the progesterone after ovulation. It starts rising. It peaks in the middle of the luteal phase, and then it goes down. And at the same time, we're also going to see this behavior from estrogen where after the peak, it goes down, it rises again in the luteal, and then it goes down. So they're both peaking in the middle of the luteal, which will be somewhere here in my case. And this will depend, again, depending on when you ovulate and how long your luteal phase is. That's how you can determine the middle. This is important because this is the ideal window for you to do your Dutch test as well as your blood work. So that would have been the window for me to do a Dutch test or blood work. And this would be a normal behavior. Now, what you see in my case is this right here is the estrogen. And then this right here is a progesterone. So never in the luteal phase does the progesterone go above estrogen. I'm always making way too much estrogen compared to progesterone, which completely explains the symptoms that I was dealing with in the luteal phase. This kind of test might not be appropriate for you if you don't want to deal with this, because it can be a lot of work. You have to commit to it, to test every day or at least every other day so you can catch where the hormones are and get a nice graph to see exactly how they're fluctuating throughout the cycle. So it is a little bit of work, but if you already are trying to get pregnant and you're using a needle or another fertility monitor, or you want to experiment like me, this is a great way to do it, especially if the other tests do not pick up on this problem. Because those, again, are only on a single day. You're only testing on one day. You can miss it. This is going to give you the entire cycle. Now, keep in mind, you're not testing serum progesterone or estradiol here. This is not directly showing you what's in the blood. This is testing the metabolites in the urine. And that also means they've already done their work in the body. Now they are being excreted through the urine. So you're seeing what came out. However, if you were to do the same thing with your blood, where you would test your hormones every single day and put them in a graph, you would get a similar picture to this. Now let's talk about the other types of tests. So we have the popular Dutch test. A lot of women have done this. Again, the downside to this is that you're only testing on one day, and ideally that should be in that window, which is in the middle of the luteal phase. What we need to pull from this test would be the beta pregnandiol right here and the estradiol, or E2, down here. These are the only two numbers that we need. All you have to do is just calculate the ratio, which would be the beta pregnandiol over the estradiol E2. And in this case, we get this number, which is 669. And this is outside of the normal range, which is 100 to 500. So you're definitely making plenty of progesterone relative to estrogen. If it was lower than 100, then we can confirm estrogen dominance as a result of not making enough progesterone in the luteal phase. And another thing to note here, if your ratio is higher than 500, then what you would want to look at would be the metabolism of estrogen, which is cut off here, but it would be this part right here, where you can look at the metabolites in phase 1, phase 2 of estrogen metabolism. And phase 3 is pretty straightforward. That's your drainage, that's your colon. If you're somebody that has sluggish liver, gallbladder, or you're not pooping well, maybe you are constipated, or maybe you're pooping but it doesn't feel complete. Those are your signs that phase 3 is not doing so well. The other one that we have is the blood work. This is an easy one as well. Again, you want to test in the middle of the luteal phase in that perfect window, which will depend on when you're ovulating and how long your luteal phase is. The range for the ratio is the same, 100 to 500. However, what you need to do is convert the units first, because right now you'll see that your values in the blood have different units. So estradiol will be in picograms per milliliter, and then progesterone will be in nanograms per milliliter. They have to match. Otherwise, you cannot calculate the ratio. I converted the estradiol number from 130 to 0.13 nanograms per milliliter. And this is when you do the ratio. 2 over 0.13, and you get 15.4. This is low when it comes to that 100 to 500 range. Very, very low. So the person is definitely showing signs of estrogen dominance because they're not making enough progesterone. If I had to choose between the blood work and the Dutch test for this purpose specifically, I would go with the blood work. A lot cheaper. You can order it on your own if you'd like. You don't even have to go through a doctor. The Dutch test is going to be a lot more expensive. However, the Dutch test will have other benefits where you're looking at estrogen metabolism. You're also looking at other hormones. So if you want to get a more comprehensive picture, that might be a better way to find out. But this is a simple, very inexpensive way to find out if you're making enough progesterone relative to estrogen. If this is resonating with you, I have an entire article on my Substack. I will link it below that you can read and find out more about what I did and supplements that I took, dietary changes that I made, etc. all in there. I hope you found this helpful. Like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next time.